Hi, everyone, and welcome to Todd Talks. I am joined by the illustrious, the genius level, the web DM, Jim Davis.
Thank you. Thank you.
And today we are talking about a very interesting thing. We're talking about like the thing. Why should you play Dungeons and Dragons?
Mm.
I know what my answer is, and I'm sure you know what your answer is, Jim Davis. But for you, when people ask, what do you tell them if they're wondering why they should play?
I go immediately with the imagination reason because so many adults have that trained out of them, to not imagine, to not pretend, to daydream. And given the number of people I've met at conventions or who've messaged us at WebDM who've just been like, thank you for for like helping me get back in touch with this part of me. That's like my number one reason, because for me, I never stopped. Like I always figured, oh, one of these days I'll grow out of this. I'll stop wanting to pretend things and play RPGs and stuff. And it never happened. I never once was like, this is dumb. I'm never going to play this again. And so it's like hard for me to realize that for a lot of people, once they get to a certain age, they stop using their imaginations. And I think like if anybody's like on the fence or curious about D&D, and the number one selling point I would give them is like it gives you a chance to play pretend again with your primarily and also with your friends. That's sort of the twofer right there.
That's such a good point. It's not a point I consider because I've been playing since I was 8 years old,
Mhm.
or reading the books and imagining or drawing or writing all the time. You do get that. I have met so many people that it's almost alien to them to imagine,
Yeah.
to the concept of shared storytelling, even for, I would say, an 8-year-old, is pretty huge,
Yeah.
that you all are having a buy-in for that story.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think that's excellent, and I think adults need that
Oh
kind
yeah.
of joy. I think everyone needs a break from being themselves. That's a great reason to
Certainly.
play Dungeons and Dragons.
Certainly.
Um,
Yeah. I need a
it,
break all the time from myself.
right. uh, but D&D is also a great way to kind of. I feel you should play Dungeons and Dragons and encourage people to. It really does give you social structure.
Mhm, mhm.
This sharing of energy around a table, sharing of a story. You are creating memories together. Now,
Yeah.
honestly, in many cases, I would say you'll remember what you did in game more than what you did, that year sometimes,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're using so much of your own brain power to sculpt a story, and you learn so many skills by playing Dungeons and Dragons
Certainly. Yeah.
um, around the
That's one of
table.
the things I love about it because it gives you this low stakes way to learn and try so many different things. Like I'm never going to plan a heist in my real life,
No,
but I have in Dungeons and Dragons. I've never, I'm never going to have to convince someone in power to do what I want them to do. That's just not in the cards for me. But I can in D&D. And like those are the kinds of moments that I live for. Like they're my favorite parts is when I've just got to like think through something and take what I know about how the DM set things up and what the context of the situation is and go like, all right, here's the plan. And my goal is always, can I get away with this without needing to roll a die? Like, can I craft something so so perfect for the situation that the DM's like, all right, that's great. No need to roll.
I always feel in D&D, and that's the role playing aspect that I love,
Mhm.
is when you're acting out your character and you're like, I'm trying to do something that like it's deception or persuasion. If I can give a good enough speech that the players and the DM are like, that was amazing, no roll.
Yeah.
That's what you live for.
Yeah.
When you no longer need dice because of kind of the rule of cool. Um, it's an incredibly magical moment,
Oh
and I
yeah.
love the other thing I really want. I think people should be playing Dungeons and Dragons. Is I want to see how you play,
Mhm.
because that's interesting to me. Like watching my own wife Megan Kenreck like play the game and learn the game.
Yeah.
she took it in a direction I would not have been like. I've just so set in my ways.
Yeah. Oh,
She
sure. Yeah.
she takes spell components and just blows them out like melts acid arrow. Like there's an intestine in there, so she like
Uh,
will literally like take out like pig's intestine and like pretend like it's a bow and shoot acid arrow.
oh my
You
god.
look at those spell components and they are just filled with weirdness.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
That's why I love playing with them. Like, it's one thing to have a wand, but it's another to rummage around for your sulfur and bat guano, or need a little bit of fluff to put someone to sleep. They're really, they, to me, they make magic magical. And yeah,
I would say
that's
that
really cool.
that is something that D&D is unusually good at for me. Is magic feels very real and very grounded in Dungeons and Dragons. Like it's kind of like when you watch a movie like Constantine or The Seventh Son or Game of Thrones. You
Mm,
feel that there's kind of a science going on, also to why this magic is working the way it is.
yeah.
Um, D&D very much has that,
Mm,
and
mhm.
that's not only from you know how it was designed in first edition, but once we're on fifth edition now, a lot of thought has been put, well, like why spells are certain locations and what school types and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure.
Um, uh, I think why we see this resurgence of so many people playing D&D right now is because uh, I know what was amazing for me is I didn't have a lot of money growing up. This was a place
Mhm.
I could imagine forever. I didn't have enough money to really be a director or to
Yeah.
go to a very fancy film school, or I didn't always get cast in the roles I wanted to be cast in, as an actor.
Mhm.
There's so many reasons to play D&D because you get moments you will never possibly have in your life.
Certainly.
And that's okay. Like I don't want to assassinate anyone. I
No,
want the joy though of being John Wick for 2 to 3 hours guilt free, right?
absolutely. Right. Like, how many times in your life do you get to make so much of a difference, that your impact ripples throughout, beyond just your immediate circle of friends and family? And I know it's pretend, whatever, but the emotional high of it isn't pretend. The feeling that you get, the companionship that comes from that, like, just being able to exercise agency and have it come from you, even if you're role playing, even if you're inhabiting a persona and pretending to be somebody else, it's still you, right? And that's what I absolutely love about D&D, is it gives you these moments to experience something vicariously that you otherwise wouldn't get a chance to. um and as well as very cheaply, it's like the cheapest form of entertainment, like,
Yeah, you buy a
you know
book and then you are playing that for 10 years.
easily, yeah, yeah. You have a like, you have infinite adventures from that, yeah, yeah.
I mean that's a very good point about agency, right? Like when you're a
Mhm.
kid, you don't have much control over your own life, really.
Mm-mm. No.
Um being able to play D&D, you can do anything. You can like go to a tavern, slay a dragon, wander over the mountains, all those things you really can't do as a kid. Like, well,
Yeah.
typically, I mean, I could do some of those things
Sure.
because I was out in the wild. um but I don't think that ever changes. Like once you get hit, go to middle school or high school. Once you're in your 20s, you got
Mhm.
college, or you're just a full on adult and you've got a job and everything else. You always have a certain lack of agency
Yeah.
unless you are a trust fund kid.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And even then you probably have some things.
Oh, yeah, yeah. As someone who used to tutor trust fund kids, there's a lot of things that constrain their lives, just not money usually.
Yeah.
Uh, but you're right. Yeah. The thing that I love about it is that, or rather, let me back up. One of the things that never really bothered me was like the so-called murder hobo, right? That sort of
Right.
carefree mercenary style. Because when I could tell, like, I'm role playing for my friends, I'm running a game for my friends, I know what their lives are like. I know they have jobs they hate. I know they have people in their lives they can't just tell off because they depend on them, even though they resent that relationship. I don't want to replicate that in a game. I don't want them to come away feeling like, oh man, this is really this is really dull and boring. It's not papers and paychecks, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're there to exercise some of that and to also take risks that you wouldn't dare dream of taking in the real world, right? You wouldn't take the kind of risks that your D&D character takes, because you have a life, you got rent, you got relationships you need to maintain. But this character, this persona that you can vicariously live in, they can take all kinds of risks. They can do all kinds of stupid stuff, and they'll probably come out all right.
Yeah, it's this wonderful opportunity to do great things, terrible things. Um, I have an amazing player in one of my games, Hope Lavelle.
Mhm.
If her character has been so scared in game, she has decided to do nothing in combat, and
Mm.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Like, no one's angry at her. Like, the character is just frightened of what is happening and shuts down. That makes sense. That's great
Yeah.
role playing. Uh,
And
it's
if
this opportunity to tell stories that you are not going to see in movies. It's an
Right.
opportunity to tell stories you're not going to see in television, books. It's
Yep.
also an opportunity to see representation that we are not seeing in
Certainly.
films or books or television shows. That's why I love Dungeons and Dragons so much, because it is your story.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to have a combat wheelchair, you have a combat wheelchair.
Got what you
This is
want. Yeah.
not up for debate.
Yeah.
Like, you're not having a studio meeting about this.
You don't have a budget. You don't have to worry about somebody's approval.
No.
Yeah, it's ruined me for most media, honestly, because I know for myself, it's like, as good as this looks, as
Right.
cool as this is, what I could do with my friends would be better. And then it really has ruined me for that.
It does kind of destroy you for media, because I know the beats. Like, I know that, it's very hard for me to watch a film I can't figure out.
Mhm,
I'm
mhm.
always delighted when it happens, but with that whole like 3 act structure that almost everything has, the concept of, if that gun is shown in the first act, it's going to go off in the third act.
Right.
Um, yeah, I watched a movie that was trying to be very tricksy,
Mhm.
um, very recently, and it they made the mistake of showing this, having this conversation about these two different mushrooms that were on a stump. One of them was poisonous, and would kill you. Another was just something that you eat with your food.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, why did you do it?
Why'd you do
You
that?
just
Why'd you do
told
that?
me the end of the story, because now I know that there are two branching ideas in the
Mhm.
rest of the film. And I knew it like immediately, and it was just like, but in D&D, you don't know what your dungeon master is up to.
You have no idea. And in that way, D&D has this like real quality to it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not reality. I think reality is a red herring in terms of like pursuit of house rules and things like that. Some of it's all right, but like, there's things that are never going to get closure on. There's things that are going to happen in game that you forget about,
Yeah.
that seem to come out of nowhere. Like, our own lives aren't linear stories. There's these collections of who knows why, and sometimes we don't even know why we do things, and we make a story out of it after the fact. We tell ourselves, oh, this is what happened to me, this is what my life was like up until this point. And I feel like D&D is very much like that too. When you're playing, even in the most railroady, you're going to do it my way kind of game, there's still so much uncertainty there that, like, you're having to deal with that all the time. Like, can I try this? Is it going to work? What do we do? How do I, accomplish the goals that I want to have? You have to like deal with that reality. And for me, it's helped me deal with like the real world so many times, because I can just go, oh yeah, this is how my D&D character would approach it. Like, I'll just role play in reverse. you know, I'm gonna role play my own life for a while. I'm gonna role play being a responsible adult.
No, I mean, I've thought about that too, about like getting healthier and playing a monk for a while to inspire me to like eat right and exercise and
Hmm.
all of that.
Hmm.
Um, and even for myself, like, I got back after a really bad year. Um, uh, I had developed, because I had to go to crime scenes for various reasons. I was in a couple of shootouts. I developed some pretty bad PTSD. It was just one of those weird years where everything goes wrong and you're there at the wrong time every time.
Yeah.
So after this was sustained, and I was debatably homeless, came back to my hometown, and I didn't know how to interact with people, honestly, because I had spent a very long time in an environment that was, I would say, very different than most of America.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not as poor, not as dangerous, not constantly having active shootouts outside your house,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So I had trouble reconnecting with my friends in a normal level, right? Like
Sure.
I couldn't
Yeah.
watch certain movies. I couldn't listen to certain very kind of bravado like statements,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
That people are apt to say, especially like when you're in your like mid 20s.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Um, but once I started playing D&D again with my friends, that changed. I had 2 hours where I didn't have to think about any of that because none of my life is me swinging a sword
Mhm,
or
mhm.
assassinating the king or fighting goblins or trolls. Like it's just a very much needed break. It's almost like going to sleep, I would say, in some ways.
Some ways, yeah.
Like having like being able to dream and have like REM sleep. It's a good reset. It's like a good just like, hey, take a break.
Yeah. I described it as going to church for me. Like, I was raised Southern Baptist, church every week, all that. Interestingly enough, my parents bought me D&D products, so that was not a problem. But I, I I eventually, when I stopped going, I replaced it with D&D, and weeks that I wouldn't get to play, I'd be a wreck. And I've always been one of those, players who's like, "I don't care, unless I'm just, like, snotty, coughing, sick, feverish, like, then I'll stay home."
Yeah.
But I need to play. Like, I need to be rolling dice to have that experience. Without it, I will feel unhinged, unanchored, and the like. Like, like I said, it's a reset. And like, there's a lot about D&D that it's easy for fans of it to like get bogged down in the weeds of this rule, that rule, what's unbalanced, what's not. And like, sometimes it's fun to do that. Certainly, I do it on our YouTube channel all the time. But the impact that it has on you as a person, as a flesh and blood person, and the people that you're around, it like transcends all of that. And I don't get that from anything else. None of my other hobbies have I ever gotten that from. um, that kind of emotional fulfillment.
Yeah, it is. It is beyond unique.
Mhm.
There's nothing you can compare it to. You cannot explain it to someone until they try it, and that's
Yeah.
the key thing is you have to try playing D&D,
Yes.
or any tabletop game, and then you will suddenly it will click for you, and you'll be like, "Oh my god, this is amazing! This is so
Yeah.
fun!
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a new experience. That this is an art form. It's like trying to explain a movie to someone who's never seen a movie, right? Like it's just
Right.
like like how do I? There's a
Let's
flat screen and things happen on it.
Right. Yeah. You just follow it along. It's one of those things, like, before streamed games, it was so difficult to try to explain this to people. And most of the
That's
time,
true.
how I would explain it is like, come and sit. Like, if you're thinking about playing, come and sit with us, hang out, just, don't be a distraction. But if you feel like commenting, if
Hmm.
something seems interesting, join in, like, sit at the table with us.
Right.
And a lot of times I would rope them in as a co-DM. I'd
Yeah.
be like, you know what I mean? Like, hey, can you help me over here? I got these other things to keep track of. And and then to me, it was a gradual process. If they want to play, then you just, like, no character sheets, just put a D20 in front of them, and we're gonna play pretend. And then gradually sort of like introducing rules and things like that for them. But it was always difficult because it's like, all right, it's not, it's there will be stories, and sometimes they'll surprise you, but it's not like writing a novel or something like that. But it's kind of like acting, but it's not really. It's like all of these things that it's similar to, but not exactly one to one. And it's kind of like toy soldiers. It's kind of like playing pretend. It's this weird thing that until you experience it, it's very difficult to define. Probably why I like it, because I like those kind of things in my life.
I think I think the best things in life are probably very difficult to define.
Yes.
Except for
if
fried potatoes.
if they're not they don't have enough, for me, they don't have enough complexity for me to stay interested for very long.
Yeah.
They've got to have a lot of layers, a lot for me to chew on.
Yeah, and D&D certainly has a lot of that and
Yeah.
continues to grow
Yeah.
quite rapidly in that regard.